technology का एक ये चीज हुई है कि it empowers all of us to create solutions. You don't have to wait for somebody else to do something for you. You can do it yourself. Grounding in computer science to begin with, and then they had interesting ways to think about it on top of that from a human perspective. They came as problems, of course, but those are also opportunities to make a difference.
Welcome back to our podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Miss Sheba Najmi.
In this episode, we're going to talk about Ms. Sheba's journey to Stanford, along with her other ventures such as Yahoo and LinkedIn, and her being the founder for Code for Pakistan.
I hope you all enjoyed this conversation as much as me and Laurie did and learned something from this.
So my question was basically like, how was your experience at Stanford? And can you tell about your journey to Stanford and how was the experience in, one of the dream universities of a lot of our viewers?
Yeah, so the journey to Stanford started obviously in Pakistan. I was born in Pakistan. I was born in Karachi, and I, grew up in Gulshan Iqbal, and I went to a school called Meadow Primary School, which was actually my aunt's school, and it was a school with a lot of neighborhood students. And I used to do well. I used to come first in class. And my older siblings had gone to study at St. Joseph's and then A-levels at Karachi Grammar School. And so I did the same. I went to St. Joseph's for, from class 6 to 11, did my O-levels there. And then I went to Karachi Grammar School for my A-levels. And I, because I did well at St. Joseph's as well, I came first in class there too. And also did well academically, so I got all A's in O-levels and A-levels. So my parents really wanted me to be a doctor, and I had, education was very sort of linear. It was sort of like, if you're good at the sciences, then you take the sciences, and otherwise in O-levels, then you take art and history, which I don't think is right. But at that time, that's how it was. And so I took the sciences. I took biology, chemistry, math. And I applied to universities overseas. I really wanted to go overseas because my older siblings had all gone overseas. And when I applied to 10 universities, because I had done so well academically, I thought I would get in, everywhere that I wanted. And that was not the case. And the only two places where I got admission when I had applied was Hamilton College and McGill University. And McGill University is in Canada and Hamilton is in New York. And McGill is better known, but because I wanted to go to the US, I decided to go to Hamilton. And they had given financial aid, but not a full scholarship at that time. So, it was challenging. It wasn't that easy. And so I left when it was time to leave for the US. And I had my heart set on going to the US. And, वो भी हो जाता है कि classmates जो US जा रहे होते हैं, then you start scheming and planning and, going and buying clothes at Zena Market for it, or whatever it was that we were doing to get ready to go, and mentally was prepared to do that. And so I came to the US, or I went to the US, I should say, for just before orientation was about to begin. And at that point, I heard that my father back home had a heart attack. And so I deferred admission and for a semester, and I went back to Pakistan. And in the meantime, I got admission at Khan Medical University. So I went to Khan, and for a semester I studied there because I had already deferred admission. But I think that at 18, I personally think that we're too young to know what we want to do with the rest of our lives. There's so much to explore. Us waqt tak to the point was that you study things in a very linear way, right? Like sciences the to sciences ke, and then, but you don't really think about all the different career paths that are available to you. It was pretty limited. And so I just had my heart set on the next thing, which is that I had really wanted to go to the US, and I wasn't ready to make a career decision at that point. So after a semester at Aga Khan, I left and I went to Hamilton College. And I studied math there because I had enjoyed math a lot in school. But what happened was that if you become a math major, I did really well at calculus, but then the higher and higher up you go in math, it becomes very abstract. You get into things like group field theory and proving a lot of theorems. And that wasn't the kind of math that I had enjoyed in school. And so I was like, this isn't it. And then, of course, there was also this side kind of mental, pressure that we place on ourselves. Okay, if I'm not going to be a doctor, I need to do something that's going to be a career wage earner. And so I took on as a minor computer science. And after a year and a half at Hamilton, I had applied for a transfer to other universities. And although I will say that the education that I got at Hamilton, in the school was actually a lot better than I got later on at some big schools, because it was just so focused. It was, smaller classes. The professors were really excellent. They would spend time with you. It was on the semester system, not on the quarter system, which gives you a little bit more time to soak in the material and really understand it. And I studied a lot of different things at Hamilton too. I took economics, I took, even modern dance and a variety of different things. I really wanted to expand my horizons. And so the liberal arts school was really good for that. Also, I had done really well at Hamilton. I had, there were maybe like 500 students in my class year. And I think I came fourth or fifth just in my first semester out of the whole class. So I was on the dean's list. So I went to the financial aid office and by myself, like as an 18 or 19-year-old, and said, okay, look, I've done well, and my family we cannot afford jitna bhi hame pay karna tha. So much to their credit, they considered that, and then they revised it, so I had pretty much a full scholarship. And the other thing that I learned really well at Hamilton was writing. I was really good at English, and writing in KGS and St. Joseph's, etc. But what I hadn't known was that that's not really, we didn't actually learn how to write. We learned how to write, like creatively express ourselves. We didn't really learn how to write in a way where you express an idea, you make an argument, you're doing this thesis in a very significant way. So the first, I remember literature class I took at Hamilton, and Hamilton is known for writing. It has a very famous writing center. And the first writing class that I'd taken, I came back with all this read and underlined, and I went to see the professor because I was shocked. And she taught me some things, and I really learned how to write then, such that, the most prestigious job on campus was, because we were also working, I was working while studying, was to be a writing tutor at the writing center, which was such a prestigious job that it almost made me reconsider whether or not I wanted to transfer out. But I had applied for a transfer, and I received admission at Stanford, and I think it was maybe Yale or Harvard, I can't remember, one of the others I was waitlisted at. And I went to Stanford. My older cousins had gone to Stanford as well. At Stanford, it was a different world. It was, on the semester system, it was much bigger. There were, I think, about 7,000 undergraduate students. And it was, they were brilliant. They were all, from, like, they had done so many things. The person who was across the dorm from me had published in Nature magazine a couple of times before becoming an undergrad. And my roommate was a world-class athlete. She was a rowing crew on an Olympic team. And this other person down the hall was a world-famous violinist. And I'm like, what am I doing here? The imposter syndrome was really hit me really, really hard.
All students, they also felt that while entering to KGS, because in our own school, we're like, oh my God, we're so good. And when we come over here, it's insane.
Yeah, exactly. The first time I think I was hit with imposter syndrome was actually when I went from Meadow to St. Joseph's.
Oh.
And then the second time was KGS. Not so much imposter syndrome in terms of academics, though, because KGS, I mean, I think I was, academically, I felt good, but I think just culturally, it was a
Meeting the
big
type of
change.
peoples and everything.
Yes. Yeah. And also I'd come from St. Joe's, which was an all-girls school, so that was different. And then for sure at Stanford, very much imposter syndrome. In fact, I think it took me a couple of years before, and my grades also weren't that great at Stanford, first of all, because bड़ी classes hoti thi, there were 300 students, 300 students and a bunch of faculty. And generally you didn't really talk to the faculty, the professor. Mostly it was the graduate students who were the TAs that you would talk to. So I switched majors to mathematical and computational sciences. That was a major that was at Stanford, which was a combination of math, science, and operations, those sorts of things. And so that major was actually very tough and very dry and boring. And I realized, this is not for me. I actually really wanted to marry the humanities and the sciences together. Like that's why I'd come to the US. I'd gone to the US, which was to expand my horizons and sort of experience a lot more of the world than I could just doing medicine, So so that major was too dry and boring. And by this point, I was 2 years into my education and I still hadn't found the right major for myself. But then I discovered this incredible and pretty special major that was at Stanford, which was an interdisciplinary major across multiple disciplines. And it was called Symbolic Systems. And it was computer science, philosophy, psychology, and linguistics. So you study the way human beings think and the way computer systems think, and how we all manipulate symbols to create meaning. And उसमें इस तरह की चीजें आ जाती हैं जैसे neuroscience या natural language processing या artificial intelligence, या human rationality even. Economics bhi thoda sa aa jata hai. So what I focused in was human computer interaction. And that was a newish field at the time. And it was, trying to understand how we design or create, the experience between when human beings and users use any kind of computer interface. How do you make that intuitive and seamless and friendly and so on? So I did my undergrad, and once I found this major, by the way, then my grades went up. So, when you're doing something that you like, that feels like you really enjoy, as opposed to when you're doing something because you should, which was why I had been doing math and computer science, was sort of like get job mile, ye mile, but, आधी चीजें समझ नहीं आ रही थी, So when you're doing something because you really feel this, for the passion of it, like I really enjoyed the psychology, the philosophy of mind even, which a lot of times was just a lot of debating back and forth, okay, how is consciousness, like are we conscious beings, or is this intentional, or are we just a series of like if you take my exact neurons and synapses and replicate them and put them inside you, do you then become me? Like, do you have the exact same experiences I would have? So these are things, lots of thought experiments, which ultimately I was like, iska fayda kya? But it was super interesting. That was the philosophy part. The cognitive psychology was super interesting. The linguistics was really hard, but very interesting. And then there was logic and math bhi tha uske andar, and computer science, and it was really fun. And it was also known to be the hardest major at Stanford. And people like Marissa Mayer, Reid Hoffman, all of these folks who executives in Silicon Valley or the top earners or what. And so it was a pretty special program, and not that many people had done it.
We were talking about symbolic systems, and I think you mentioned this, but I just want to reiterate it. A lot of people who work in tech have done this degree, a lot of Stanford graduates, including people who worked behind the iOS system, the founder of LinkedIn, the founder of Instagram, also the founder of Yahoo. So a lot of people have like worked through this degree, and I want to ask you about this. What is it about the fact about mixing computer science with humanities that makes this degree so much different than generally how computer science is taught?
Yeah, great question. And it's by the way, it wasn't quite the founder of Yahoo, but it was a CEO at Yahoo.
The CEO, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, my bad.
No, you're fine. But so symbolic systems is a special degree, and it was a small major at Stanford at the time that I was there. In fact, there wasn't even a master's program in it. It was just an undergrad program. And then my final year, they started a master's program with 2 students. And then the following year, I did a master's in symbolic systems when it had 5 students. So it was very, very small. And as an undergrad, it was very special because, computer science, if you're interested in computer science, you can do that. You can study that in symbolic systems. If you're interested in the way the human brain works and the way that we think and what are the similarities and differences with computers, you can do all of that and computer science. And so anybody who wants to understand a little bit more, so computer science to hai, straight up, you learn computing, you learn coding, you learn how algorithms work, and you think about all of those things. It's from the computer angle. And we study all of that. And then in addition to that, we study like, how the human brain works, and you can see the similarities, the differences. You can see that human beings are not entirely rational, right? Like if you think about rationality as something that an algorithm that you put into a computer and it spits out the optimum result, you can see that, well, human beings don't actually often make results that are rational in that sense, because there's so many other factors, variables that come into play. There's psychology that comes into play, there's emotion, all of those sorts of things, right? And it gets really interesting when you start to think about us as our brain as a computational system, but the differences that has. And like I said, we studied artificial intelligence. This was, 20 some years ago. And so that was way ahead of its time. And now, of course, everything is about artificial intelligence and everybody's talking about that. And when I studied human computer interaction, to us waqt bhi, it was pretty new. User experience, the term user experience was coined by Don Norman in the late 80s, I believe. And Don Norman is somebody that I've had the pleasure of now honor, I think, of working with. He lives in San Diego, which is where I live now. And he's in his 5th retirement. And now he's thinking about design education and how to reform design education. And so I got to write a paper in one of the committees he set up. But, उस वक्त इतना new था, this notion के भाई computers should even be that the user experience even matters, when the user interacts with the computer, that it's there to serve the user. पहले ये होता था, you imagine, नहीं, the user just needs to learn the way the computer is structured and the way it's built, and you just, if you're smart, you figure out the details of that. But the reality is it should not. I think it was pretty seminal when the decision was killed. No, you don't have to be somebody who goes deep and majors. It like learns the tool so hard कि only 10 लोग दुनिया में computers इस्तेमाल कर सकें जिन्होंने बिल्कुल उस चीज में major किया और degree ली है. You should be. This is a tool that should be applicable to anybody, and so what that means is कि it should work for anybody, right? So when I came back actually from my undergrad, I came back to Pakistan because my father was unwell after I finished my undergrad. And I was looking through the newspapers. Us zamane mein, you would look through Dawn and all these newspapers to see what job openings are there. That's how you found jobs. And so I was looking through the newspaper.
The old
and
LinkedIn.
the old LinkedIn, exactly. And you would look through the jobs and classified section and all of this kind of stuff. And I saw there was the only thing that was happening. Computers mein kuch nahi ho raha tha. Human computer interaction mein to bilkul hi kuch nahi ho raha tha. user experience mein. So the only jobs that I saw that were interesting, actually there was one job that I saw that was interesting, was this was around 2002. The news media was just getting freedom from the state, right? And it had gone completely, like, it had blown up. So there were lots of these satellite TV stations that were just springing up. And so I saw an ad for a news anchor for a TV station for Indus News. And these were becoming satellite stations that would be broadcast in 60 different countries around the world and all of this kind of stuff. And part of what I really enjoyed doing, and I think that this is interesting because to realize that human beings are multifaceted, it's not linear. Like हमें हमेशा पाकिस्तान में जिस तरह when we had grown up, it was कि आप एक चीज में आप interested हैं, आप एक चीज आप career wise करें, but you realize कि नहीं, लोगों के बहुत सारे शौक होते हैं, बहुत सारे interests होते हैं, and you can do a lot of different things. They don't all have to be your career, and some of them do make their way into your career in different ways. But you can do lots of, as a human being, you can do lots of things, not just one job, right? And so one of the things that I used to really enjoy doing was, I would MC things on stage at Stanford. I would act in plays in KGS and St. Joseph's, and also in debates in KGS and St. Joseph's. And is tarah ki, there was this sort of like this, I don't know, performance aspect, if you will. And so I applied to that job having no experience, but they, for some reason, called me for an audition. And then I went in and I did an audition and I got the job. And so that was really interesting. I was a news anchor for like 7 or 8 months in Karachi. And I was, us waqt elections bhi ho rahe the, so I was reporting results around the clock. And then I was out on the streets reporting public opinion. I had my own daily show eventually, which had, myself and this older gentleman. We would look at, the top stories of the day and talk about those. Ek Mujahid Barelvi saab hain, unke saath main kafi co-anchoring ki and things like that. So those were interesting. And they also, everything teaches you something, right? Like the worst thing you can do is not make a decision, not do something, not do anything, because then you're not likely to learn. And so news anchoring bhi kar li, to uska kuch isse wasta nahi tha symbolic system se, lekin I learned how to think on my feet. And because, it was like a startup, we'd be going live and I'd say, now we're going live and here's a report or something like that, right? Here's a report, and we'll line up the report on the back end, and something broke, and and then you're like, oh, okay, and then you just like start ad-libbing it and doing things right on the fly when you're going live. बहुत सारी इस तरह की last minute crazy चीजें होती थी. Breaking news आ गई, suddenly आप किसी को interview कर रहे हैं who's been waiting for you for an hour, and now you're interviewing this some famous ambassador or somebody, but there's a breaking news and they need to cut, and you have to do it politely, but also it's like all of this kind of mayhem. And so that flexibility and that sort of ability to change things on the fly is important. So I learned that. You always learn something. But then I went back to Stanford for my master's to study symbolic systems again. And usme is dafa, when I studied symbolic systems, so then because it was a master's thesis, you choose an advisor, and I focused in a particular area. And the area that I was focusing in was looking at, there were a lot of call centers that were being outsourced and offshored at the time to India, to various places around the world. And there were things like accent bias. So for example, if I see you, if you look at me, you expect ke haan theek hai, I will probably sound the way I sound, right? But if you see me and suddenly I start speaking Chinese to you, you will have a little bit of a cognitive dissonance for a moment, right?
Yeah.
And right. Or if I speak in a very British accent, that would be probably a little bit also strange, right? And that wasn't even very good British, but so. But ye hota hai. You have people, Pakistanis growing up in Asia. A friend of mine did that. He grew up in Hong Kong, so he speaks Chinese fluently. And you have Pakistanis growing up in England who lambi daadi hoti hai and British accent mein bol rahe hote hain, and then you're like, acha, ye bhi hota hai. So, And so what happens is कि जो call centers outsource हो रहे थे or offshore हो रहे थे, I did like a psychology experiment. Essentially, my advisor was in the communications department, and symbolic systems in मजे की चीज़ ये, you can really kind of study like anything that intersects any of these worlds, right? And so one of the things I was looking at was like cognitive biases against if you experience a dissonance between where, you know, we have sort of stereotypes of what people should sound like when we look at them, and then when you meet them and they don't, you know, does that help or does that hinder? So for example, a lot of the times when you would call like Dell computers ka customer service, so you would hear somebody who you know, would say that their name was Jack, but they really sounded like they had an Indian accent, right? And so what are the biases that people associate with that, right? And so us tarah ki cheezein study ki thi, and it was interesting, it was fun. And then I went on to work at Yahoo as my first job as an interaction designer after studying human computer interaction. Us zamane mein interaction design was a field. Did I address your question, or was there more you wanted to know about symbolic systems?
No, I think you did address it to an extent. Yeah, I think the gist of it is, and you can correct me over here, that the fact that you're able to be so flexible with it allows for you to discover what you want to do, and that at the end of the day helps you pick a career where you're working at something you like, you're working with something you're actually passionate about.
Yeah, I agree. And you get a solid and deep grounding in each, like in computer science, for instance, right? So that's why a lot of the people who did become CEOs or, you know, went on and did a lot of great stuff in Silicon Valley was they all had a deep grounding in computer science to begin with. And then they had interesting ways to think about it on top of that from a human perspective, which I think that's the special sauce.
Yeah, and like even like Steve Jobs, I remember I was watching an interview of his, and he was talking about how when he dropped out of college and he was taking courses just randomly, that's where he studied like typography and how you write letters. And when he made his first computer, all of his theory behind that came from that and not from studying computers or something like that. So I think for a CEO and for someone who's like working towards making a product, it really helps having that different backgrounds and those different like understandings of a lot of fields.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you worked at Yahoo. How was that experience, especially considering this was right after the dot-com boom, and this was when people were trying to buy Yahoo, and it was all a lot of panic, etc. So what was that experience like?
It was good times. So after grad school, as I mentioned, I joined Yahoo as an interaction designer, and I worked primarily on Yahoo Mail for over 6 years. And it was such exciting times because it felt like Yahoo was the center of the internet back in the early 2000s. And especially the user experience design team. We were called GUIs, which was GUI. Back in the day, GUI was the term, you know, graphical user interface. GUI
Graphical user interface.
It was the term for the user interface. And all the designers were called GUIs, as in GOOEYS. And so, you know, I think that the user experience design function had a very kind of elevated position at Yahoo, which was pretty rare in most companies. For example, you've probably heard that Google is a very engineering driven company. LinkedIn, I would say, is a very product driven company, product management. Yahoo at the time felt like a very design driven company, which was very exciting because we could envision all sorts of things for the future, right? So for example, Yahoo Mail fell within the communications and communities group. And within Yahoo Mail, we were looking at things like, and Yahoo Calendar was also a part of Yahoo Mail. Yahoo Address Book naam tha uska, the contacts, that was also part of Yahoo Mail. So for Yahoo Calendar, we were doing this kind of very forward-thinking research. And our user experience researchers went to, I didn't get to go, unfortunately, but they went to Brazil and I think Indonesia and various places to try to see, what is the future of, you know, communications and communities. And so they were looking at like how people used the calendar. And so they went into people's homes and they found that people would put in their homes a calendar on the fridge, and they had a shared calendar, especially between couples, husbands and wives, and who needed to coordinate, because they had to seek is then, you know, there's a a dinner here at this time. So, and you need to share calendars, right? So that's how we realized, okay, calendar sharing is an important feature. And so we need to incorporate that. Or SMS, this was again early 2000s, so mobile phones were becoming a thing. And in Indonesia, we saw that people would use SMS, or like they would use the internet under the table to sound smart, right? Like if they're sitting at a table and out with their friends, and their friends would talk about something, hot topic of the day, they didn't want to appear uninformed, so they would quickly Google it, and then they would pretend that they knew what it was about, right? So then we learned, these are the sorts of things that are important. And the user experience design team was actually made up of, I think, 4 or 5 different functions. So there was interaction design, which is what I was doing. There was visual design, which is more the UI part. Then there was design prototyping, and user experience research, as well as front-end development. Initially, front-end development was also a part of the user experience design team. And then once we had a restructure, then it became a part of the engineering team. But shuru mein, that was also part of the team. And so the team was really strong, and we would always, the design team would get the best perks, like we would get these big monitors and stuff. So then I think, the product management team complained, okay, hame bhi chahiye. So, those sorts of things. And I think at Yahoo also, we were looking at the front page of Yahoo, and we came up with some social networks, and it was just really interesting. I mean, remember, this is before Gmail existed, right? And so I was working on Yahoo Mail. We had just acquired a startup called Oddpost, and that's why I was hired to work at Yahoo and transform Oddpost into the new Yahoo Mail. And Oddpost was doing very interesting things. Like they were the first to do DHTML, Ajax on the web, like stuff where you could drag and drop things into folders, like your messages into folders. Like this was all new, right? This was Web 2.0. And so that was some of my work early on. And then Gmail came on the scene. Before that, our Yahoo Mail's biggest competitor was Hotmail. And then when Gmail came on the scene, then we, quickly were trying to launch the new Yahoo Mail. And also then the classic Yahoo Mail had a very different user base than the new Yahoo Mail. The old classic Yahoo Mail had people that were like older, less technically savvy. Just say, for example, agar aap andhere mein apne ghar mein jaएं, kitchen mein jaएं, right? You know exactly, even if the lights are off, where your mugs are, and you get it because everything is in its place. So they were used to that, right? कि Yahoo Mail में हमें compose करने आता है, हमें send करने आता है, and don't mess with it. And yet you need to keep innovating. And so the integration of Yahoo Messenger into the new Yahoo Mail had produced really good results. And so, the desire was that we should integrate that in the classic Yahoo Mail as well, which was very like, Web 1.0, aap compose ka button dabaएं, you get a full page refresh and a compose page. And so that was my job to figure out, because, how do I integrate it in a way that doesn't, unka kitchen jo hai na, wo barbad na ho, right? And the things that they're used to doing, because the audiences are completely different. Yahoo Messenger was younger audience. It had emoticons and audibles and all sorts of things, right? Whereas the older Yahoo Mail had these people, internally, we call them the graying technots, people who were just sort of used to a particular way of doing things. And so how do you make it useful for them without interrupting their flow? Aap compose kar rahe hain, suddenly an instant message comes up, like you'll be completely frazzled, right? But yet there is useful functionality there to be had. And so it was a very thoughtful project. It was just one of the many projects I worked on, but that one sticks out in my mind. Yeah. And then near the end of my time, by the way, the interaction design and visual design functions merged, and we all became product designers doing both UX and UI because the industry was shifting.
What's very surprising is that my dad still in 2023, his business email is still Yahoo. Because he's been waiting for like 34 years, and like that's what he's used to. So that's what he's gonna stick with. And I don't think he'll ever switch. So I do that. Moving on, one of our aims with this podcast is showing younger people who are going into tech in the next 10, 20 years that there are a lot of options in tech. A lot of people just believe that it's just, software development or it's back end or a front end, etc. But experiences like yours tell us there's a lot more. There's GUI and UX design, etc. But how future-proof do you think this is in Web3 coming up with, and recently the Chat GPT-4, they did a whole experiment where they took a drawing and it made a website for them, etc. And so it's pretty cool that it is changing. So how do you think that change will affect what you do and your industry?
Yeah, so yes, things are definitely changing. And AI, so I'll say two things about it. AI it can really help with a lot of menial tasks, right? Or a lot of things, and even beyond menial tasks, but things that are repetitive for sure, things that are, any kind of, actually not even repetitive, but really make things a lot faster in terms of even design map doing wireframes. I can probably, just say there's so many tools I can say, okay, hey, I want a wireframe that shows a login screen with a username and a password and a sign up button. And I literally just have to type this and it will create it for me, right? So it makes things a lot faster. Like a lot of tasks that are less creative, if you will, meaning you can just sort of give instructions and it will do that. And so there's any kind of creative endeavor that requires a little bit of higher order thinking, right? Like where you have to say, okay, so AI can't yet figure out what problems to solve, right? It can do UI, but it can't figure out what your desired high level outcomes are, right? For particular certain types of people with certain needs. It lacks empathy, right? So one of the things that we do in user experience, for instance, and design. So, and let me take a second to sort of define what design is, right? So design, Julie Zhou, who is who used to be the VP of design at Facebook, and she writes a lot, is very prolific on LinkedIn. She wrote the book, The Making of a Manager, which was a really good book, and probably the first book for user experience managers. And she said, okay, design is the act of intentionally trying to influence an outcome. So what that means is कि आप कोई भी चीज achieve करना चाह रहे हैं जिसके बारे में आप intentional हो रहे हैं, as opposed to just chaotic, right? That is design. And she called it design being the pixie dust for innovation. And anybody is a designer, right? So for example, engineers, they design better language models to improve artificial intelligence. User researchers design better questions to get more insights. Data scientists design better metrics and data models, right? And managers design better processes to improve speed and quality of work. And data scientists also, I should say, why do they do that, right? So they do it to more accurately quantify success. So there's a reason why you're doing something, and you're doing it with intentionality. So design is sort of any creative endeavor in pursuit of an outcome. So all of these folks are really kind of designing. And to design something really well, you have to really, really understand it. You have to deeply understand the problem and the users, right? So, and you have to start with the people, with the users, not with the problem. So you have to lead with people, not problems. And so when you lead with people, what that means is that instead of going in with this mindset, कि भाई, I want to solve XYZ problem, I want to solve the problem of homelessness. So I'm going to just build a homeless shelter here. What's missing in that is कि मैंने खुद ही problem सोचा, खुद ही उसका solution सोचा और जाके बना दिया. instead of thinking of what the problem is, I have to start with the people. I have to spend time with people who are experiencing homelessness and not have any problem in mind, but just spend time with them to understand कि अच्छा आप अपनी रोज की जिंदगी कैसे गुजारते हैं, and you know what आप सुबह से रात तक वो करें, and you observe them, you talk to them, and you interview them, and you understand कि अच्छा आज वो किस तरह काम कर रहे हैं, how are they doing these various things, and उनमें क्या क्या मसाइल हैं उन चीजों में, right? And like meaning what is something that is taking them too long, like उनको 10 बसें बदल के एक जगह से दूसरी जगह जाना पड़ता है, right? And so you identify those things कि अच्छा हाँ, and they sort of saying हाँ उसमें मुझे 4 घंटे लग जाते हैं ये करने में, and then you're like okay, maybe that is a thing that can actually be optimized. So you think about the outcomes you'd like to influence, and higher level design is sort of designing outcomes instead of designing products, right? Okay, what will be different in the world if you are successful? So going back to AI, I think AI can augment our natural capabilities and make us more productive, right? We can do things a lot faster and easier. These menial, like I tell it ke ye design karke ye cheez mujhe design karke de do, ya write up chat GPT mein ke write me a paragraph about symbolic systems and why it's interesting and useful, and it will write me some stuff. So it frees up time. The good thing is that it frees up time for more impactful, meaningful work, for higher level work that only we can do, because it can't yet figure out what problems to solve. You have to spend time in the design world, for example, in the user experience world, you have to spend time with those people to identify, okay, what are the problems we should solve? It can do UI, for example, user interface, visual design, but it can't figure out the desired higher level outcomes for certain types of people, like people experiencing homelessness in this case, with certain needs. And who needs mujhe nahi pata until I spend time with them.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so.
Okay, Miss. So apart from all of your design experience, I've even seen that you worked in Code in America, and then I think have started this project Code in Pakistan. So can you tell a bit about like Code in Pakistan and what it aims, like what are its aims?
Yeah, absolutely. So Code for America, I was a full-time fellow at Code for America in 2012. So Code for America is like a tech nonprofit based in San Francisco that's trying to radically change public services by making them human-centered. So everything we know about, design and user experience, it's trying to apply that to government services, to public services. Because क्या होता है कि in the private sector, you're used to things on, like on my mobile phone, I have Google Maps and I have mobile banking, right? Like these things that help me navigate really easily. But in the public sector, anything to do with government, I still have to stand in those lambi lines, even in the US, apna license renew karne ke liye. And so we have, there's a big gap of innovation and a big gap of how services meet our needs between the private sector and the public sector, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is that we as citizens, we think, bhai, anytime we need to interact with government, it's going to be corrupt and bureaucratic and inefficient, and it's just not going to meet my needs in the way I'm used to. And government, on the other hand, feels that all citizens do is complain, and we have our legacy way of doing things, so we don't need to change anything. And it's just not a way to move forward smartly, because the bigger this gap of mistrust between the public and private sectors, or this gap of innovation, which leads to mistrust, so then you see things eroding, right? Like trust in government eroding. I mean, it threatens democracy at its core, but also everything just goes to hell, right? Like you can't do anything on as a citizen of a country when that partnership isn't there, when that trust isn't there. So Code for America में उनकी एक year-long public service fellowship program था, जिसको प्यार से कहते थे the Peace Corps for Geeks. And technologists from places like Google, Yahoo, NASA, etc., would take a year off to partner with the city government to understand the needs of citizens in the city and to create technology solutions that met those needs. So bringing that same kind of innovation in a very human-centered way to the public sector. So I did that for a year. I was partnered with the city and county of Honolulu, and I learned a ton. And the reason why I did that was because I had always been looking for a way to marry social impact with technology. But I just, and I always also wanted to contribute to Pakistan, but I didn't know how to beyond sending money, right? So like, jab earthquake hua tha 2005 ka, so I raised a lot of funds at Yahoo and corporate matching also at Yahoo. And I sent a lot of funds, but it wasn't like hands-on, it was just sort of fundraising and sending funds. I couldn't be hands-on creating the impact. And I'd always been thinking about that, because when you grow up in a place like Karachi or in Pakistan anywhere, like you see the disparity, right, between and so many things that don't work for so many people. And we were from Gulshan, myself, like from a middle class family, but you could really sort of see there are people who have even less, a lot less, right? And how do you make things function? उन बेचारों को अगर कभी गवर्नमेंट के साथ कुछ काम करना हो, by the way, तो वो किसी गांव में से आप आए, you have to दिन में 3 बसें बदल के आप आए, आप पूरे एक दिन की डेली वेजेस छोड़ के आते हैं, which matters so much to you and your family. एक गवर्नमेंट में जाके आप अपना डोमिसाइल का बनवाएं पेपर, या शनाख्ती कार्ड बनवाना, व्हाटएवर इट इज, आपके पास कॉन्टैक्ट्स भी नहीं है, तो आपको तो कई दिन लग जाते हैं, इतनी मगजमारी, एंड इट्स सो डिफिकल्ट that it's just not a way to do things in a smart way. So after that, in 2013, the following year, I founded Code for Pakistan, because now, after I'd done that fellowship at Code for America, suddenly I was like, this is something now I've learned a bit how to do. And this is something that I can help in Pakistan do it, right? And so I founded Code for Pakistan. It wasn't like I came here and founded Code for Pakistan, actually. Everything we do is like, a lean startup methodology hoti hai, where instead of going whole hog into something, you test a hypothesis, जो minimum viable prototype जिसको कहते हैं, you create in the leanest possible way, you test your hypothesis before you go and you create an entire organization. And so what I did was I did the Karachi Civic Hackathon, which was one of the first hackathons in the country. I think उससे पहले सिर्फ एक कोई hackathon शायद हुआ था नस्ट में. In 2013, people had not heard of this. And it was extremely lean. I did it at T2F with the late Sabine Mahmood, who gave us space for free and her staff for free, and Jahan Rauf Pasha. And together we collaborated and we did this event, jisme there were no prizes, no winners, because I had no budget. And I had 9 essay questions, because I wanted people to know what they were coming in for, because nobody knew at the time what the hackathon was. And in 6 days, we had 111 responses, and people were just so excited to use their skills, their, to do more than just use their voices to complain, but actually come together to create solutions. Because with open source technologies, ek to fayda ye hai कि you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can all collaborate, and others can build on it. And people were just so excited. There were people who were not just technologists. There were doctors, there were journalists, there were animal rights activists. har tarah ke log aaye to come up with solutions for their city. And so that hypothesis was checked. And then I founded Code for Pakistan, which introduced this idea of civic innovation to Pakistan. And among other things, Code for Pakistan runs a fellowship program in Peshawar, in the KP province, in partnership with the KP government and the World Bank. And we have run 8 cycles of fellowship program. There are 20 full-time fellows partnered with various government departments that are creating digital services. So far, about 50 digital services have been created. And they're well used. Like Rabta is one that we did with the KP traffic department. And traffic ka bahut masla hai Peshawar mein. But it helps now. Pehle chalan वगैरह लोग देते थे, traffic wardens देते थे, things were not tracked, there was room for corruption, all sorts of things. And now the challans are all online. People can go verify their challans online. They can do their license verification. They can, and it also helps with decision making. It also educates them, but also helps with decision making because all of that data is going to a dashboard, and the senior ups in the traffic department can see it. यहाँ पे ज़्यादा challans हो रहे हैं या यहाँ पे ज़्यादा traffic accidents हो रहे हैं, तो हमें यहाँ पे U-turn डालना चाहिए, for example, right? And we've done that with the KP government. We've run 7 cycles, as well as with the federal government, with the National Institute of Health. And one thing we noticed was that for those 20 positions in the KP fellowship program, we would get 6,000 applicants, lekin only like very, very few qualified women. And you're supposed to have a few years of work experience, right? And so our head of programs, she noticed this after a few cycles, and she said, okay, we need to address this further down the pipeline. So we created the KP Women's Civic Digital Internship Program, जिसमें अभी उसका second cycle हुआ है, जिसमें there were 50 women interns located all over the province of KP, and they were remote क्योंकि घर से बाहर जाने की इजाजत नहीं है, so we sent them mobile devices in places where they didn't even have access to internet. And we, you know, they had already graduated, but they hadn't had work experience. So we needed to up-level them. And we taught them, you know, things like data science. They worked on the KP Open Data Portal, which is also something that we had created during the fellowship in partnership with the KP PMRU department. And they, you know, did amazing inferences between different types of data sets to say things like, Yacha, when you consume junk food, what they found, or when you know, your productivity as a student declines, right? And you could mash up different, these are all public data sets. And then they were front-end and back-end developers, designers, QA folks, etc. So the KP women interns, abhi unka second cycle ki graduation hui, and I went to that and I was blown away. 47 out of the 50 traveled from all parts of the KP province, like from Chitral, do din ka safar karke, with their parents outside waiting for them. And each of them presented what they had worked on, the projects they worked on, civic projects, you know, with alongside mentors. And I was just blown away because we had done the midterm and the post demo days and kind of assessments, and unki evaluation bhi hui thi. And these were fantastic. Like, they have more skills than I did coming out of Stanford, and they're ready for jobs. And so, and hopefully, you know, they worked on civic projects, so they're civically engaged, and they also, you know, worked, or in the next cycle, they'll work alongside the fellows, work with the government departments. So, ye to KP mein humne, we also like train government staff, because one of the things you have to do is, you know, we as technologists in outside of government tend to have a way of thinking and technical skills and design skills that are not generally present in government, right? And again, it's that way of thinking, like this human-centered approach. And if we want to change the institution of government, then you have to train and coach and bring all of that there as well. So wo bhi hum karte hain, training government staff. And then the beyond the digital services, beyond this kind of fellowship and internship program, beyond the civic academy is what we call when we train the government staff, then there's the very big piece, which is the community piece, which is the citizens. Like, there needs to be the jazba amongst citizen technologists to use their skills to improve government, right? Otherwise, government khud se to is tarah, it's not going to innovate on its own and get to where the private sector is. And so we have done many civic hackathons all across Pakistan, in Islamabad, Lahore, Peshawar, Karachi. And the hackathons are good, not necessarily the solutions they create, but in terms of igniting community, in terms of sparking citizens to become more civically inclined and motivated. And then we create these volunteer groups that are called Civic Innovation Labs, where they can continue working on projects after that in partnership with government, and sometimes just for their communities. Doesn't have to be with government, but it's like becoming community-oriented, civic-minded, and doing those kinds of things. Abhi jab last year floods aaye the in August, so one of our developers was in Swabi. and which is in the KP province. And he had no idea कि floods कब उनकी तरफ स्वाबी में आने वाले, when is he going to need to have to evacuate, right? And he overnight he created a map, a crowdsourced map on top of Ushahidi, which is an open source platform. And it was the first map, and citizens, people could report and put in data and say कि यहाँ पे floods आए हैं, और यहाँ पे जो है वो relief shelters हैं, और यहाँ पे जो है वो medical aid मुयस्सर हो रहा है. Because what happens every time there is a crisis, a disaster, you've probably seen this in Pakistan over and over, all of the civil society sort of mobilizes, but it's in a very uncoordinated fashion. It's sort of like, अरे मेरे पड़ोसी के चाचा वहाँ जा रहे हैं, you know, उस जगह, and you know, he can take like 5 tents and you just take it there and you do but it's very uncoordinated. There's no sort of sense of like कहाँ पर tents की ज़रूरत है, कहाँ पर already provide हो रहे हैं tents, how do you know, do this in a coordinated fashion? And so this map, in a couple of weeks, it got input from organizations like Al-Khidmat, and it had 1,100 data points on it, and these were verified and data points. And so, in fact, you can check out this map. It's online. I think it's at bit.ly/floodlight. Floodlight is the name. And because of that, you had the first map of the country where you could see यहाँ पे relief shelters, यहाँ पे ज़रूरत है, यहाँ पे ये है, यहाँ पे वो है. And then we were able to match make, because there was the DC office in Swabi needed, they had a relief shelter, but it needed food and medical aid. And so we were, Al-Khidmat saw that. And so then they were able to provide food to that entire camp. And so I think about it and I'm like, you know, it's so simple. If just through crowdsourcing data, these two well-meaning organizations like Code for Pakistan and Al-Khidmat can actually provide aid, you know, overnight to these hundreds of people in this medical camp. So imagine if all of the civil society comes together in a coordinated fashion, right? Like, what can we do? And of course, uske upar se if government also comes and collaborates and opens up their data, so we can have a coordinated playbook for every kind of disaster that might be, but also we can analyze data, because now we have data from last year, and of course government has a lot more data. We can analyze all of this and we can then be better prepared for the next time, because we'll see कि अच्छा हर दफा इधर river banks पे आते हैं, we need to do things here, we need to build embankments here, we need to, you know, whatever it is, but we can actually be better prepared. अभी preparedness पे कुछ काम नहीं होता. अभी हमेशा जब भी disaster होता है तो then response में, you know, everything, but over and over and like how, you know, that's not very smart. So so anyway, that's one of the things. So the role of citizens is, I mean, huge in every possible way. Even as mentors, by the way, for our fellowship programs and our internship programs, we have a lot of mentors who have logon ki zindagi badal di, right? Like I looked at these KP women interns, and they really thanked all of their mentors, and they learned to do so much. And I was like, wow, like we really have, if we come together in a collective way, really have the power to do so much. So Code for Pakistan has been around for 10 years now. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, and I'm really excited to be, you know, it all started in Karachi and now we're back in Karachi. We're going to have a guftagu, like a civic conversation in 3 different cities. The first one is in Karachi on Monday, and then there will be one in Islamabad that same week on Thursday, and then I think the following week in Peshawar. So again, we're trying to ignite community also to work on these things, and then to, you know, we're lucky that we have a great relationship with the KP government. We're also building relationships with the Gilgit-Baltistan government and federal government, and hopefully, let's see, in Sindh as well. But I really think it takes all of us. It really takes a village to, you know, to make this kind of change happen. And it may not happen in my lifetime. You know, I may not see the outcomes of it during my lifetime, but as, you know, to use a famous quote, nothing worth doing is easy. Yeah. This is not the easy road. Like changing government, you know, will take years and years and years, but we have to try, right?
Definitely. And I think that resonates with this a lot, because as you mentioned earlier that you used to debate in like school and in college, and similarly I would do MUNs, and throughout my MUN experience, I became extremely politically active, and I started to go down the activism route. And I thought that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do law, and I wanted to work. And then slowly, I started spending time with people who were in the industry, and I realized the industry is so like it's so bureaucratic and so that bringing change is so hard while being part of it. And that's where I developed my passion in tech was, oh, I can make solutions. I don't have to be part of the system. I can make solutions from outside. And that's why this is so inspiring to me, because this is quite literally what I've been going through for the past 3 to 4 years, where I decided to switch from, because earlier I was deciding to either do law or humanities or something like that, and then go towards a very like law and like change related degree. But then I realized the real change that I can do at a much larger level is by actually creating something that can help people. And so, yeah, that's what I want to do now. And that's why I find it
That's
very
amazing. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I love that you shared that because, you're right. Like technology ka ek ye cheez hui hai ki it empowers all of us to create solutions. You don't have to wait for somebody else to do something for you. You can do it yourself. And like with open source technologies, you can collaborate with other people. You can reuse solutions that have been done in everything we do is open source. And so I love that you said that. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. And also, like I said, people have lots of different interests, right? So I've been a volunteer with Code for Pakistan for the last 10 years. We have a full-time team in Islamabad and Peshawar of employees, but I've been a volunteer. Our current CEO and other folks are really like, as a volunteer, like serious volunteer, right? Like commitment and carrying all of this on. And, in the US, I've worked on user experience jobs. Like I worked recently at LinkedIn, etc., managing a few design teams. And to me, all of these things make sense because it's never about the technology. It's all about people, right? Like we're creating solutions for people. So whether we're being human-centered in public services or being human-centered in, the users of the LinkedIn profile, it's all about, the people that you're creating things and solutions for. And again, like we're multifaceted people. We have different interests. We have lots of interests. You don't have to just choose one.
Okay, Miss. So our final question is that for people who want to make a change, who are like want to make a change in civic technologies or design or like the fields in you work in, what's one piece of advice you would give them?
So for people who want to make a change, Pakistan is really interesting. And I assume you're talking mostly to a Pakistani audience, yeah?
Yeah.
Pakistan is really, really, it's full of opportunity because it's full of needs, right? And needs go up, they can as problems, of course, but those are also opportunities to make a difference. Pakistan, for example, is ground zero for climate change consequences, right? It sits in a geographic location where average temperatures are rising faster than anywhere else on the planet.
Yeah.
And so our climate change ko le lein, disasters, obviously a lot of natural disasters are a result, like floods are a result of this kind of thing, right? And but mind you, Pakistan is responsible for less than 1% of the world's planet warming gases, yet it's the 8th most vulnerable nation in the climate crisis, right? So आप climate change को देख लें, आप अपनी सड़कों को देख लें, road infrastructure को देख लें. Supposedly, this is, I was just talking with some friends yesterday, like from here, you go through interior Sindh, supposedly it's a motorway, but वो road ऐसी है कि, I'm not sure how they call it a motorway. या आप वो देख लें कि कचरा कहाँ पे डंप हो रहा है, कचरा कैसे जमा हो रहा है, या आप कुछ भी ले लें, साफ पानी ले लें, right? Like water sanitation, measuring water quality. Actually, we're just about to do a pilot project in Peshawar, just using volunteers to go to the government water towers and measure water की quality क्या है. And again, this volunteers can do a lot of this stuff, right? And then we'll be able to help make better decisions and share that. Everything we do is publicly shared, so the data is going to be open and shared, and people can see over time कैसे water quality हो रही है, air quality आप देख लें, आप government schools देख लें. I went to Gilgit-Baltistan. I spent 10 days there and met with lots of government folks, and I visited 4 different government schools, and I was blown away by the quality of education, which I think is extreme. It's state of the art. They get people from faculty and volunteer students also from places like LUMS and NAS to come and deliver sessions to them. They've set up these STEM classrooms, and it was state of the art quality education. But then I look at Sindh, and I don't even know about Balochistan, like two of the more neglected provinces, right? And I'm like, yahan pe mere bachpan mein to government schools, ghost government schools hote the mostly, right? And I don't know that it's a lot better. So आप वो मसला देख लें, आप कुछ भी, anything, anywhere you look, there's no shortage of problems. There's no shortage of needs, and therefore no shortage of opportunity for you to make a difference and an impact. Any little thing you do, anything you take up will make a difference. And so if you're interested in joining communities, check out codeforpakistan.org. We have a volunteer sign-up form there as well. And we're trying to get communities together that can just do koi bhi masail aap utha le and do some really good work there. Like, you will make a difference. That's what I love about doing work in Pakistan, is that it gives me such a sense of purpose. Ye purpose America mein mujhe nahi feel hota when I'm working on LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn search. Those were all meaningful. I loved the teams that I was managing. But जो purpose होता है कि आप लोगों की जिंदगी में difference create कर रहे हैं. When I saw those 47 women interns, and I was like, oh my God, I can see the difference we made in their lives in just the last 6 months, and now they're set up for jobs. We connected them to jobs. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. I would advise folks. Yeah, and if you need help knowing where to get started, come reach out to us, Code for Pakistan. We'll create community groups. That's what we're trying to do. We'll get you started, use our platform. But there's no shortage of things to work on.
That's really,
Sounds
really
amazing.
wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much, Miss, for taking out time. And I hope you enjoyed getting interviewed and enjoyed the podcast.
Yeah,
We
thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
enjoyed
I
it a
did.
lot.
Thank you for that.
Thank you
For that. I really enjoyed it. Take
All right.
care.
Look forward.
All right.
so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.